Welcome to the Everyday Investor Podcast. John Alcock has been sounding the alarm for a while now around changes that are occurring within our financial system. I caught up with him recently to discuss BNZ, his own bank, and how they've rolled out mandatory device-level tracking as just a price that you have to pay to access your own money on your online banking apps. So this is a really important conversation for anybody who's storing up financial resource for future use. Hope you enjoy the conversation. It's a little bit of a deep one, but if you have the time and the headspace to be able to absorb this, I really do believe it'll make you a better, more prepared investor for the future. If you haven't already, make sure that you like and subscribe before we get started, but let's go. Welcome to the Everyday Investor Podcast, John Alcock.
Thanks, Darcy. Thanks for having me back so soon.
Thanks for coming along. The Auckland mayoralty. Tell us a little bit about that, because we just had those elections and you ran for it. So tell us a little bit about how that went.
Again.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with sort of how I did then. I only spent $200 in total on that entire campaign.
Wow.
Aside from me turning up, I didn't have any billboards, no flyers, no real social media, those kind of things, no advertising spend. None of that. Is just a bunch of people in the community, 11,273, I think, somewhere around that number, which is double what I got last time. So I'm improving a lot and not spending any money doing it. I'm by far and away the most efficient candidate.
And probably having like ALC as the first initials in your name.
I bet that annoys Wayne Brown so much.
But the distance between Wayne Brown and pretty much everybody else, quite a big distance, right?
Phenomenal.
So there's a lot of catching up to do to, I guess, capture the attention of most people who...
That was always going to happen.
Yeah.
And so if any of the other mayoral candidates went into this race thinking that they had a chance of beating Wayne Brown, I think that's a bit delusional, actually.
Yeah.
Like, just with that incumbent advantage and the fact that he's done a relatively good job in his last term, I think he was always going to be a shoo-in by a significant margin. But I'm not really just running to win. I'm running to sort of build that public profile so that I can potentially win in the future. It's not about winning.
You just answered my next question then, which is like, why do people do this sort of thing when they know that they're probably miles away from even winning? But it's to build your profile, presumably, and to make it easier for next time, right?
Yeah, it is about building that public profile, because let's be fair, I'm no one and no one knows who I am. And so the more I do these kind of things, the more I get recognized for doing these kind of things, and people understand sort of what I'm talking about more deeply. And then I think, as I proved between the last election and this election, I get a lot more votes as a result. But it's not a short game. Anyone going to that thinking they can just pull off a massive win without having multi-million-dollar budgets to spend on it, much like Wayne does and did in his first campaign as well. I just think you're a bit delusional in that case. Right. Like, that's not the game you should be playing. Unless you do have millions, unless you're sort of a multi-millionaire that can dump wealth into it, that's fine. Then you might have a shot of winning. But from my perspective, I can't do that. I'm unwilling to do that. And what I'm really trying to do is just spread my message a bit more directly to sort of as many people as I can.
Right.
And if people like it, more people vote for me.
Yeah.
And since I've doubled my votes, I think I'm on the right track.
Why is it that your message seems to be striking a chord so much right now? Because I know it's not specific to just you. It's your own style, yes, but you are tapping into a certain ethos, aren't you? Like a certain brand of economics, a certain brand of politics, a certain ideological framework that seems to have been absent for quite some time in politics and just general public discourse for a while.
That's probably true. I think it is the cycles of individualism, collectivism at a very sort of deep level. And we've had progressive increases in the sort of collectivist mind frame, where we outsource most of our responsibilities away from ourselves to other institutions, to other bodies. People have seen that's where power is accumulating, and people that seek power go to those positions and then accumulate power in those positions. And they give you all the promises, like they always do, of we'll protect you, we'll look after, we'll make you safe. And that really resonates with a lot of people right up until the point where the thing that they want to do is now not the thing that you can do. And so we've sort of seen that through the COVID period. Most people in New Zealand got on board with that, and they locked down, they put the masks on, they did all the stuff, and they closed themselves away, which caused a large amount of damage economically, financially, to a lot of people, traumatically, mentally, you name the rest of it. Did it save some people? It probably did, because we probably did reduce some of the risk of that virus spreading around a little bit. Was that a worthwhile trade-off? In my opinion, no, I don't think so. I think it was too much, but that is the sort of collectivist attitude. And the way that Jacinda would frame all those things is you're protecting everybody else in society. We're doing this for your own good. And I think after that, people really started to get the message that their own personal agency was now being taken away from them. It's sort of fine if you want to give some of your personal agency to somebody else and outsource things. We do that all the time. Most people have cleaners. Okay, we're outsourcing our cleaning to somebody that we trust to do the cleaning. That's fine. But when the government that has a monopoly on force turns around and says, I don't like the thing that you are doing in particular, so we're going to stop you from doing it, and we have the monopoly in force, and there's nothing you can do about that, that's now a non-consensual transaction. And so when we get to that sort of point, people start to feel that quite deeply, that now their consent is no longer required for action to be taken against them. And when that starts to happen, you see the swing back towards more individualistic kind of approaches, where people want to take more personal responsibility for themselves, both the good and the bad, because that's required. And we're in a position where a lot of people blame the government for both the good and the bad because they've outsourced all the decision making to the government. And what they would like is to bring back some of that personal responsibility to themselves so that they can make their own logical decisions without being railroaded into any particular outcomes by third parties with whom they usually have no connection at all. So it always goes in swings and roundabouts. But generally, over the very long term, we tend to progress in a more individualistic sort of way, sort of as the human species.
So we tend to make more progress under a mode of individualism rather than collectivism.
Definitely. I mean, history is very obvious about that. You look at all the communist countries around the world, they all completely imploded and destroyed themselves. And that goes to, well, Venezuela's doing it right now.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that. Venezuela, where you have to bring your own medication to the hospital.
Yep.
That's not a sign of abundance.
How much inflation have they had? 10 million%? I mean, it's very obvious where that sort of collectivism leads. And it always seems like a good idea at the time, particularly the way that it gets framed by those more collectivist people, because it's, we're going to look after you, we're going to protect you, we're going to make sure nothing bad happens. It's like, but that crushes out any individualism, any economic advantage in innovation that would normally happen, because we're now in a society where you have to ask permission from the government to do almost anything, including now dealing with your own personal finances.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that, but I just want to kind of dig into this a little bit more, because I know what you mean in a sense, because I can kind of, I guess I naturally resonate with a lot of what you're saying, and so I'm conscious of that, and I'm trying to take the other side of that in my mind as you're saying that, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what about the needs of the many? Doesn't that outweigh the freedoms of the few when we're dealing with an existential crisis, whether it's war, pandemic, or some sort of weather event? Isn't the government justified? And don't we want them to take away our freedoms if it's going to help us, genuinely help us to keep us safe?
Who determines what that need is? That is the question that you have to ask. It's like, should I be would you be happy if I was the person determining what that need was? Would you be happy with Chloe Swarbrick doing it? David Seymour, Christopher Luxon, Winston Peters. I think I've said this almost every podcast that I've done recently, actually, including on yours. Is who determines what that need is? If your house gets wiped out by Cyclone Gabriel, it's like, well, who now determines what we need to do to rebuild your house? Do we rebuild it exactly the same way? Or now, given the opportunity of that unfortunate destruction that is not your fault in any way, would you build a different house? And at what point is the government now liable to come in and build you that new house with all the improvements you might want to include from the destruction of the house that you had previously that you might have been thinking about? If it's just replaced wholesale, that might be okay. If it's built to your new specs, it's like, well, now we have to divert money from everybody else in society to your particular house. And where do we draw the lines around that? Do we go to the same value? How do we determine that value? And the problem is, those questions are literally impossible to answer.
This is why we gravitate towards the polar extremes, right?
We need to gravitate towards you making your own decisions. It's like, well, you insured your house. Here's your payout for however many millions or hundreds of thousands it happens to be. Now you've got that payout. You can design and rebuild whatever house it is that you want to. If you don't have insurance, well, you've personally taken that risk that some weather event will come and wipe out your house. And yeah, that sucks for you. I can empathize with that, but you also made that decision. And instead of paying insurance premiums, you spent that money on something else, which maybe you enjoyed more. Maybe you spent it on golf, car racing, boats, anything else, cycling. Maybe you spent it on something else. But who am I to come along and tell you how you should value different things in your life? Because no one values the same things to the same extent.
Yeah, that's right. And it kind of makes sense, I guess. Like, I'm just thinking about when I guess it was Cyclone Gabriel, wasn't it? Where we had a lot of slippage and damage on clifftop properties.
Yep.
Right. So what do? Do we pay for the replacement of these multi-million-dollar homes on the clifftop? They can't be rebuilt. They're basically just going to have to be bought out. Do you really want that person to benefit to that extent? They chose to buy that property.
Arnie Road is a good example. There was a house on the top of the cliff and it slid down the house. I used to walk past that almost every day. And I think the father was killed as it slid down the hill. I think he was just in the wrong place of the house, the wrong time, and went down the hill. It might have been the father's son. Terrible tragedy, not nice for that family at all. You can see the house, how much it slid down the hill as well. So let's say that property has a valuation of 5 or 6 million, and the rebuild on that's going to cost you 5 or 6 million. Does the government now not pay for 10 poorer people's houses to be rebuilt because they're rebuilding one rich person's mega mansion? Because that's actually the opportunity cost that you're looking at. And it's like, what do you do then? You say, well, we've committed to rebuilding everyone's house, but if I spend the money here on this wealthy person's property, then there's 10 other people whose houses may be worth 500,000 to $1 million-ish. There's 10 of those houses that we now can't rebuild because we've decided to spend the money over here. And I think now you're in that situation where most people would say, oh, we should just rebuild the 10 other people's houses because that would be benefiting more people overall. But then you've got to think about how granular you want to actually now get with this. Because you could then say to those 10 people, it's like, but there's a whole bunch of people who live down in Westport where properties are very cheap that now have houses that are only $250,000. Do we rebuild 20 of those and just give the middle finger to the people who have the $500,000 houses? What if people are living in a van? What if people are living in a tiny home? What if those things are only now tens of thousands? How far do you go down that list to work out the needs of the many versus the needs of the few? And honestly, it's an impossible question to answer. I can't answer that.
Yeah.
And my response is, don't do it. The government should not be the insurance company for the country. Emergency services, yes. Like the whole point of emergency services, they're extreme sort of events, and you need to have emergency services for those kind of events to get people out of that immediate danger to their lives in which they cannot possibly make a rational, well-logicked decision about what to do, and to the point where they now have the time and headspace to be able to do it, even if it's been a fairly traumatic event afterwards. So emergency services, yes, but being the final insurer of everyone's property, life, whatever in New Zealand, you can't answer that question.
Yeah.
Because you don't know every single thing about every single person all of the time. You don't have perfect data. And no matter how much data you collect, you're still never going to have perfect data. It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
So try not to do the impossible. Yeah. And if you find yourself asking yourself those questions, like how far down do we go? How do we pick and choose between people? The correct answer is we don't. But that means you don't insure people's houses unless you're a private organization. And the underlying reason behind that is houses are private goods. And by that, I mean they are both rivalrous and excludable. If I live in a house and I use the facilities of the house, you can't live there because I'm there. And so we can exclude each other from each other's house by using walls and doors and fences and all the rest of it. So anything that falls into that category of being a private good should not be touched in any way by the government at all. And that is
for evil. Yeah.
For either direction.
Yeah.
What do you mean by good and evil?
We'll come to that again later.
I think that's an interesting question as well. But you cannot make that decision. Once you start putting the public sector into the private sector, or in fact the other way around as well. Like, the private sector should not be involved in government either. Once you start combining those two things together, you now have an impossible question to answer, because you're spending public money that you take from everybody, and now you are determining who your special interest groups are. And obviously, those are the people that you'll focus on the most, because that's where you get your votes and your campaign funds from, because your objective is to get reelected.
Exactly. And now back to politics. And
I don't take any donations.
And that probably explains why you're going to get there. If you get there, and you probably will get there over a long enough time frame, you're going to get there because of merit, not because of financial backing and being beholden to some secret organization or some other external ideological force.
That's my objective. It also makes my electoral turns extremely easy to fill in, because I just put 0 in every single box.
Yeah.
I have had lots of people come to me and offer me differing amounts of money to come and support my campaigns. Like, look, if you guys want to go and put billboards up, or you want to host me at events, that's fine, but I don't take donations.
Yeah.
Not personally, not directly. I will not be bought by anyone for any reason. And so if you want to support me, what you can do is invite me to events. You can invite me to come and talk to people, and then people can make up their own minds.
Yeah, that's good. NZ Loyal. Tell me about that, because when I was watching one of your short videos on Instagram recently, I saw the logo there and deputy leader. Is that right?
I've been appointed the deputy leader.
So tell me everything, and our audience, because they might not understand what NZ Loyal is. I'm only just coming to grips with it myself via the help with Wikipedia, which calls it a far-right conspiracist party.
What do you mean by right?
What do you mean by far right as well, right? And conspiracist party, and why isn't the Green Party a far left conspiracist party on the other side under Wikipedia? But it isn't.
I think they are. So I just do need to be clear that the position I'm in now is an appointed position, not an elected position. That is the way that is written in the party constitution. So the current leader, Calvin Alps, has been pursuing me for quite some time to come and join the party. We have written originally New Zealand Oil's original policies sort of together in the background without even knowing it. But we agree on a lot of things. Not everything, because no one agrees with everybody and everything. But we agree on a lot of principled positions, particularly the 5 core principled positions that I hold, which is everyone is their own property. The fruits of your labor are your property. You may do anything with your property as long as it doesn't damage the property of another. If you damage the property of another, you must compensate them to the full value of that damage and act honorably in good faith. So we agree on those core principles. And he's been asking me to come and join him for a while, because I sat down with Liz Gunn at the last national election 3 years ago and talked her through my positions. I was with Freedoms NZ at the time. Both small new parties. I think New Zealand Oil ended up on 1.8%. I think Freedoms NZ ended up on just shy of half that. They wouldn't cooperate at the time, which is fine. But that's just the way things go. And since then, Liz Gunn has been stepped down as the leader, and a bunch of other annoying things happened, which we're recovering from. But Calvin has always been the person who's been writing Liz Gunn's speeches in the background. And I found that out when I've talked more with Calvin. And so that is the direction I'm heading at the moment. They are most aligned out of any of the current political parties with what I'm trying to do. More so than ACT. David has to be more politically expedient because he's a larger party. And so you sacrifice some of the nuance around the side for being in politics. He necessarily must make compromises with New Zealand First and National. There's no other way about it. I don't begrudge David Seymour for that. I'd be quite happy if David Seymour became the Prime Minister. In fact, I think that would be a great outcome. So you can either vote for me in New Zealand Oil if you like, or I'm quite happy if you vote for ACT as well.
Caught up with David on a podcast a long time ago, and it was what his words to me were, I went down to Wellington, a libertarian. I came back an anarchist. But with what you're saying, it seems like the position that you're ultimately trying to get into is a position that then turns itself against you and almost forces you to become that which you hate, in a sense. And what I mean by that is, if you were to be successful, if you were to get into power in some form, what kind of guardrails are there to stop you from becoming just like them, where you have to kind of yield to these forces that cause you, like institutional forces that cause you to play the game rather than...
That is an excellent question, because those forces are there. And you've just talked about David Seymour. I 100% believe that he actually believes that, felt like that, and is in this position that is very difficult for him to navigate. It's very difficult for anyone to navigate. And my only objective is to reduce my own power.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I kind of want to delete any position that I get elected to. I want to decentralize power as much as possible. I do not want to accumulate power here. I am just as fallible as everybody else. I am just as easily tempted by all of the powers and things that come with various different titles and departments and things. I am no different from anybody else in that respect. There is the distinct possibility that given sufficient amounts of power, you go and do things. You don't have to have discussions anymore.
Yeah.
Why? You just get rid of people. Yeah. That's what dictators do. It's like, yep, I'm just as fallible as everybody else when it comes to those kind of things. So I have to keep it forefront of my mind when I'm doing anything. I want to decentralize power. So win the mayor election. Okay, I want to go and sit down with every local board and say, how can I now support and assist you for making local decisions by locals for locals? How do I give away power from the mayoralty to make it less powerful overall so that you guys can help the local area that you're in the best possible way? And this sort of comes from the human species, social tool using species, the bit of tribalism. Sort of the collectivism works fine, sort of up to about 150 people. Some people can deal with more social interactions, some people can deal with less. But once you exceed that sort of capacity and get up into the thousands of people, it's very difficult to know what every single person in your community needs. And so what you should actually do is take a very high level view of that. And you should delegate and decentralize as much power as you possibly can down to the lowest level you possibly can, which is the individual. I want the individual to have the maximum amount of choice that they possibly can. I want them to be in charge of most of their own decisions. Obviously, if you're talking about roading, public transport, cycleways, you're talking about the sewage, the power, the internet, those national level infrastructure things, individuals can't do that by themselves because they're not Chorus. They're not Land Transport New Zealand. They can't do those kind of things. They can't make sure the interconnecting roads all match up. They can't do those kind of things. So those decisions need to be delegated further up the tier. But if you always keep in mind that when you get power, the idea is to decentralize it away from you, you'll actually end up doing a lot better, whether that's in your personal or professional life. A lot of the business owners that I talk to, that's their number one problem. They have too much that they're doing internally. They've started with a small business. They've learned how to use the accounting package. They know how to do the sales and marketing. They've learned how to use social media. They've taken it all themselves. And then they've gone, well, there's a bit much work. I'll hire somebody else. So they've got somebody else to come and help them. But that person now does almost the same job as them.
Yeah.
Or they want to bring in sales. Or they're doing a little bit of administration plus a bunch of other things. But what generally happens is that the owner feels like they're losing control. And so they try and pull it back.
Why do you think they try and pull it back? So I have a theory on this, but
they're scared.
They're scared.
They're scared of delegating, losing control, and trusting other people.
Yeah.
And I think you should actually find and work with people that you can trust.
So here's my theory. I think that power centralizes over time because the money that we pursue is not finite, and it forces all of us to cling on to what we have and not give things away, whether it's subconscious or conscious. And I've just been trying to, as you've been talking, trying to find this quote from Friedrich Hayek.
Right.
To be controlled in our economic pursuits means to be controlled in everything. And I probably kind of loosely attach it to what I'm thinking, I guess, in that if the money is designed to lose value all the time, then effectively you're controlled, right?
I'm going to have to attribute that quote properly to Friedrich Hayek now, because I said this the other day on Leighton Smith's podcast.
Oh, did you really?
I really did.
I didn't get that far in the podcast. Okay, sorry.
I paraphrased exactly this. If we don't have control over economics and finance, there is no such thing as freedom of speech or freedom of movement or anything else in the Bill of Rights. Yeah. Because if you don't have money and some kind of currency that you can trade with other people, you can't really do anything, because our society is collaborative. And we need to be able to collaborate with each other and exchange value. And money is the medium in which we do that.
Yeah.
That brings us on to sort of. Let's go. Your question's really good, so we'll try to keep
we'll come back to, don't worry. Yeah.
Because we have monetized our assets, because our money is valueless, we buy stuff. instead of just trading with each other in the way that it sort of was intended when sort of gold came around as our original currency. The biggest example of this is the housing crisis. It's not really a housing crisis, it's an inflation crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But since your money is worth less and less every day, and the money is getting cheaper and cheaper over time, people go, well, I can't just hold on to the money. I have to do something with it. And so the only thing that most people can get their heads around fairly easily is land ownership. So they buy properties. But then when they get richer, they don't invest in productive enterprise. They just buy more properties. And that's not really increasing the productivity of New Zealand as a whole, or in fact, any country. And it is reducing liquidity in the market by tying that liquidity up in assets, which we can't do anything about. The Band-Aid solution to which is debt. So loaning against those assets to get some liquidity back into the market. But the core problem is the money is not worth anything.
That's right. And it's leaking all the time.
All the time.
Going down in value.
All the time. So does gold.
Yeah.
I know a few people who are into silver trading. Like, oh, silver's the most fantastic thing ever. It's most fantastic. It's $60 an ounce. It should be like $280.
Adjusted for inflation, yeah.
But when the price goes up, people mine more. So more silver comes onto the market because it's more valuable to extract. The same thing happens with gold. People do that as well. Elon Musk was talking about going to space. Why? Because there's asteroids out there with so much gold on them. It's a fantastic material for heat transfer, which is required at those levels when you've got to do your computing at sort of a couple of degrees above absolute zero.
Right.
And so by monetizing assets instead of leaving the money alone to be a medium of value transfer between us, we're tying up all our liquidity in assets that don't actually do anything. They become purely speculative. The gold market is largely speculative. The silver market is largely speculative. The property market is largely speculative. The Bitcoin market is largely speculative. Let's not leave crypto out of this because it has the same problems when it's interfacing with limitless fiat currency. Mm. And the solution to it is that we should start trading in Bitcoin because it is a finite supply that no one has control over. That is the ultimate decentralization of the currency. I think a lot of those other problems would almost vaporize.
I think a lot of it would. And that's why there's a lot of truth with that saying, fix the money, fix the world. Because going back to what we were saying before, I think the reason why power centralizes, my view, is because the incentive structure with just the base money is that we always have to do more for less and contract out the work, but actually take the responsibility and bring it inwards. We have to find ways to get the fire department to do more work, to get the police to do more work, to get the banks to do more work in terms of enforcement. And that's just the trend because people are under pressure all the time and they feel it. And I don't think people are conscious of it. And if they are conscious of it, they'll look for a political solution. But really, this is more of a monetary solution that needs to be brought on. But they are connected, right?
They are directly connected. They're directly connected.
Let's just. I want to go back to the NZ Loyal Party just before we move on. And when I saw that logo, I went on there. I went online, saw the Wikipedia article, very short article, and that term, a far right conspiracist party. Like to me, I would be quite offended if someone called me that. Firstly, would you label yourself a far-right conspiracist?
So this comes down to the definition of left and right. Okay. And so left is just another word for collectivist. Those are people who want to are really highly collaborative and they want to work together and they want to share everything together. And there's a lot of people and there's nothing wrong with doing that as long as it is voluntary.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what that selects for is psychopaths. And the right wing, as the alternative to the left wing, what is actually meant by right is individualism. And there's half the population is on that side of things, somewhere on the spectrum between left and right. So if by right wing you mean very, very individualistic, then that is an accurate description. I am extremely individualistic. I have no problem with anyone that wants to be more collectivist on the left, as long as it is consensual. No glory vows. You're not allowed to trap people there. You're not allowed to keep people there. No inescapable communist communes. If you can run a commune like that, which you can, again, up to about 150 people, you can get people to voluntarily collaborate. You can find out what everybody needs. There's some economies of scale to be made there in the way that you can do purchases for that commune. No problem. You do you. I have no problem with that. But if you if you're talking about far right, well, to me, that just means hyper individualistic, in which case that's extremely accurate.
Yeah.
Because I don't care about your race, creed, color, or code. Neither does anyone else in the New Zealand Loyal Party, as far as I'm aware. Just, it's not a relevant consideration because we're focusing on the person as an individual.
What about the association with being a Nazi? So if you're far right and you believe in New Zealand, and
Nazis are left wing.
What's that?
Nazis are left wing.
Don't ruin it. But that's the narrative, though, right? Is that if you're far right, you must be a Nazi, and you're racist as well. And what do you think that exists? Like, where does that narrative come from? And what is the truth that's being distorted to get to that? If you believe that that's not accurate,
the victor always writes the history, and so we're sort of looking at the evolution of fascism, which is a left-wing ideology. I mean, it started in Italy, and Mussolini was a collectivist nationalist. And that's where you get the sort of national socialism coming from, because it's collectivist in nature, but it was highly nationalistic, which is a bit different from sort of the Soviet Russia's flavor of collectivism, which wasn't quite so nationalistic in that respect. But it's not a right-wing ideology. These things only come from the left, because a right-wing ideology, you're sort of looking at the formation of America and the Declaration of Independence, the breaking away from that collectivist British Empire. That is where the more individualism came from, which is deeply rooted in Western Christianity and sort of the Puritan aspect of America. That's where that comes from, whereas that collectivist is very mainland European. But that's socialism. And I must have said it 1,000 times in 1,000 comments now. And people go, oh, we live in late stage capitalism. No, we live in early stage communism. That's where this is leading, where more and more responsibility is being abrogated to and displaced to the government, which, as we've just discussed before, attracts psychopathic people who want to accumulate power. And it's super effective at doing that. Hitler, psychopath. Mussolini, psychopath. Stalin, psychopath. Mao, psychopath. Pol Pot, psychopath. Kim Jong-un?
Yeah.
Whatever he is. Yeah. You're telling me that's not a psychopathic personality that's intent on dominating every single person that's under his care?
So why is nationalism so bad?
I don't think it is.
Why do you think some people do think it's bad? Because, and to define nationalism, correct me if I'm wrong, it just means you're proud about where you come from and where you live, perhaps. Why can't I be proud of that? But that seems to be now associating me with being a far right Nazi of some sort of description.
So you're viewing that through an individualistic lens, which is why we can get along quite well on these podcasts.
Sure.
But if you are a collectivist sort of at heart and you really think through a collectivist lens, every time you see nationalism, you look at it as a socialist looking at nationalism and you go, that's a Nazi. Why? Because that's what you would do. It's actually a reflection back on yourself when you look at that, because you are the kind of person that would 100% go to Nazi rallies and support people like Hitler who are national socialists.
Right.
Because you're a socialist.
So you're projecting.
Okay. Whereas if you're hard right-wing libertarian side of things, and which is actually the bottom of that graph, but if you look at everything through an individualist lens, you can go, well, yes, I am personally quite proud of my country. There might be some things wrong with it. I might not like all the things my leaders do all of the time, because you're looking at it individualistically, and then you know that those people who are leaders are also individuals and are therefore going to have differing views to yours, and that's okay. But if you're on the left and you view everything collectively, it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And so this projection just gets way out of hand, and it is very easy for psychopathic tendencies, sociopaths, psychopaths, those kind of people, to take advantage of that suicidal, pathological empathy that the left wing has. And I just need to clear here, right? Empathy is not a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing when it's taken to the extreme.
Suicidal empathy.
I'm not the one that came up with this. I'm just quoting.
No, who was that? I was going to say Josh Gad. No, Gad Sad.
Gad Sad, yep.
Jewish Canadian writer. Yeah.
Evolutionary developmental psychologist.
There you go.
I wish I had known about him when I was doing genetics, because that's what I would have done. Wow. I would have mixed it with I did mix it my degrees with some psychology, but just a couple of papers here and there. But I wish I'd known about that. I love Gadzad. He's fantastic. The way that he is able to explain these things in ways that
With
just
humor and sarcasm. I think it's awesome.
I can't get there. He's way better at this than me. If you want to go see those kind of things, go watch Gadzad.
That's right.
But that's where it comes from. So I'm sort of echoing the things that he has said in much, much greater detail than what I've said here. But it is that projection. And once you realize that you, including me, project the way that we think onto other people all the time, it becomes sort of a lot easier to go, hang on a second. Just take a step back. Right? I'm extremely libertarian. I'm extremely individually focused. But we're maybe looking at a situation where some empathy could be used here. So what I want to identify is people who are logical, rational, intelligent people who also have some empathy. And I generally find those people libertarian left, which we would normally call hippies. That's where they sort of came from. It's that very left wing, you do you, peace be with everybody. We want to get along with everybody. We want to try and gel it.
Yeah.
You have to have them.
Interesting, because that's basically, it's the antidote, because it's the social, it's the care, right? It's a soft heart towards others, that you either you go through something, or something happens to you, creates a soft heart. You're aware of other people and you want to reach out voluntarily to lift them up. I know I've gone through a journey like this, and I suspect if I didn't, I would be pretty hardcore as well, right? Because I would be just all about the business, all about the dollars, all about, getting stuff done. Whereas those on the opposite side would be all about, how does the other person feel? And then that sort of stuff just naturally doesn't sit right with me. But there's been a workaround that's happened that I think you kind of have to go through that. And I often wonder that those that have these more collectivist, socialistic, communistic tendencies have come from households where they haven't yet left that really tight household unit psychologically, and they're trying to recreate it when they go out in the world. They're trying to create this,
I think you're probably right, actually.
Environment.
I think you're probably exactly right. They've probably come from those very collectivist sort of households. That's the way they've been brought up. They've probably come from very homogeneous societies, from homogeneous areas where a lot of people around them are very similar to them in a lot of ways. And I don't mean racial ways, I mean cultural ways. So skin color really has nothing to do with it. You can, if you go up in Remuera, you go to King's Prep, like those people are all going to be similar people to you. If you go to Auckland Grammar, same thing. But if you end up going to whatever the local school is in Invercargill, that is going to be very different from the Auckland schools, but you'll still be with people in a similar sort of grouping to you. There's a ratio. I can't remember what the ratio is called. It'll come to me at some stage. It is the reason why you shouldn't put social housing in extremely wealthy areas. The Gini coefficient. That's what it's called.
The Gini coefficient.
The Gini coefficient. Not like the magical genie. I think it's spelled Gini. And it is the ratio at which people start to get unrestful about the disparities in wealth. And we're getting quite off topic here.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. You see it particularly in England and those sort of more feudalistic societies, that the upper class, so to speak, generally try and hide their wealth a bit. Like they might have a lot of wealth, but they don't show it off. The Queen's a good example. She has she used to have fabulous amounts of wealth, but she would drive old Land Rovers. She was a mechanic during the war. She was a bit hardcore in those respects. She wasn't about rubbing her wealth in everybody else's face. You talk about Donald Trump. That's something that I think he does particularly poorly. Having a gold toilet is not a good reflection on you, I don't think.
It's a reflection on your rear end, perhaps.
Maybe. I'm not getting a heavy metal poison from that. I don't know. But it's something that the Americans do a lot. It is that opulence, that wealth, that showing off and displaying a wealth to everybody all the time. And when that disparity gets too large, that's when you start to get revolutions. The French learned this literally the hard way. They were being awful. The aristocracy was being awful with displays of wealth. They were being horrible to all the peasants that produced all this wealth. And this is where you get that collectivism rising feeling, because the wealth disparity is huge and people pointed out, we can rise up together as the people and overthrow the aristocracy. Sometimes that's necessary, but it almost never results in a communist utopia afterwards, because whoever led those revolutions will rise to the top And then the first thing they do is turn around and kill everybody that helped them rise to the top.
Yeah.
Just look at Lenin, look at Stalin, look at Mao.
Look at
Single
Kylo
time.
Ren, Star Wars, right?
Because that story is really common in our sort of shared human history.
It's playing out like that struggle between the collectivist and the individualist, right? Yeah, it's crazy, right? So it's a story as old as time, though, isn't it?
It is, and it keeps happening again and again and again. I really wish we'd learn some lessons from this, and sort of that's rule 5: act honorably in good faith. Are you acting honorably in what you are doing? Are you trying to decentralize decision making out to the lowest possible level?
Right.
And if you take that mind frame into every decision that you make, then I think you end up with better decisions. And I say better because they're never going to be perfect. Yeah. There's no such thing as perfect. It's unachievable. And as much as I would love to be a perfectionist, it's not possible.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as perfect.
Yeah.
So you're aiming for better, and you're aiming for that evolution of better decisions sort of over time, finding out sort of what works, what decentralizes best, what things can't be decentralized, which is public goods. That's the definition. Those things need to be taken care of sort of collectively. That's the purpose of taxation. We can't, as much as I would like, go to a purely anarchist society, because that will immediately result in feudalism, which just takes it back to where we started from.
So the role of the government is security, so police force, justice system, defense force, and some types of infrastructure. Is that right?
National defense, local defense, justice system, emergency services, and national infrastructure. Those are the 5 categories of public goods.
What do you think the tax rate would be if that's all government did?
Well, I'd like to make it 1%. I think when I was running for mayor the first time, the Hammock Times posted an article saying that I wanted a taxation bonfire and I wanted 0.1%. But I want it as low as you can possibly go. But I have sat down with Calvin at New Zealand Oil, and we've worked out that 1% transaction tax on every single transaction in the country is roughly
transaction tax as well, not an income tax.
No income tax, no GST.
More of an indirect taxation. So when you're spending money, when money's moving around, 1% of all that financial flow, rather than if you earn more than somebody else, you're going to be on a progressive tax system and get this more higher drag faster you go. But straight, just everybody's the same.
We want to encourage people to produce income. I want everyone to be richer. If you want some people to stop doing something, you tax it. The smoking rate in New Zealand has decreased significantly as we increase tobacco tax, just as an example. But I want people to produce as much income as they possibly can, or at least as much income as they want to produce, because I have to then consider that some people don't care about material things. Some people don't want a multi-billion-dollar house in a 6,000-foot naval aircraft carrier yacht with 1 million jet skis. Some people do, and they should be able to go and do that as well. But some people are quite happy to have those more communal friend relationships, to be able to have a nice house that meets their purposes, that's fit for their family, in a nice area that goes to a school where they can interact with people that are like-minded to them, and to be able to do that in a sort of free and open way without somebody else like me coming along and telling them what to do. So I want to try and avoid that outcome as much as possible. And we don't do that by penalizing productivity. And even under a 1% transaction tax, rich people will pay far more tax than anyone else. Remember, they consume more. They buy Aston Martins. They buy Lamborghini Uruses. They do buy 100-foot yachts. Well, what's 1% on what's Graham Hart's yacht? 75 million?
Yeah, because that's what some people are probably thinking right now, listening to this or watching this. They're probably thinking, well, that sounds a lot like trickle-down economics, and I've never seen that work. I've never seen the poor be lifted up. But having said that, if you do support those who are genuinely the most productive people in society, you are going to get spillover effects. They're going to become employers.
Yep.
And that's how you get economic growth.
Yep.
But that's not how the majority of people, especially on the collectivist side of the spectrum, will see things.
Trickle-down economics was a pejorative used by the left and the Americans around either Reagan or Nixon. I can't remember exactly which one.
Reagan and what was the British one? I was just watching her the other day. Oh,
Thatcher.
Yeah. Yeah, wasn't it around then?
Yeah. But trickle-down economics is not actually an economic concept. It's derogative used against people talking about how the economic activity flows to other people in the economy as you increase everybody's wealth. And the best thing about the 1% flat transaction tax and everything, as the more productive people get, And the more wealth they get to keep themselves, the more transactions they will conduct, and therefore the more tax the government will collect. And I hate talking about more tax like that, but as that productivity increases, as people demand more of things, as they make more decisions for themselves, you're going to need more national defense, local defense, emergency service, justice system, national infrastructure. And you have to pay for that somehow. And since it's public goods, you can't exclude anybody, and there's no price competition. It has to be via tax.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, anarchists. Like, there's no other way around this.
Yeah.
If somebody can propose an idea, please do. I will listen. I promise.
Technocracy, right?
That's come up a few times as well. An AI technocracy. Like, in a roundabout way, if you wanted to run a purely communistic collectivist society, that is exactly how you would do it. And then we get the Borg from Star Trek.
The Borg, yeah, we are Borg. Yeah.
Resistance is futile.
That's right.
We're going to come and we're going to incorporate your biological and technological individualness into ourselves. We're going to delete any aspect of personality you have, and you will be a permanent slave forever. There won't be boats, cars, churches, mosques, synagogues. There won't be any of that things, because you'll be one with the collective.
We are Borg.
And the collective goes around and takes everybody else's stuff. They don't produce anything. They can't produce their own technology. They can only acquire new technology by completely dominating and subverting species that they come across. That's the Borg. It's like, but that's a technocracy, because it's all hyper-technological. They got that technology by infesting another race. They're a virus.
Now, that's probably a really good segue. And I guess technically this is the start of the episode where I finally get to ask you the question that triggered this conversation, which was something that you shared with me maybe a couple of weeks ago, I guess. And I've subsequently heard you talk about it on the Leighton Smith podcast as well, where it's not like you were debanked, but indirectly, I guess you were not comfortable using your banking services because of something that you discovered. So do you want to just talk me through what happened?
Yeah, so I was looking at setting up just a segregated account inside my BNZ app, and I've been very complimentary about the BNZ up to this point. And I've advised people use them. They've been great. I've been with them for 41 years. I've had very few problems aside from this. But they're rolling out a new program at the moment to prevent or reduce the amounts of fraud and scams that they have to deal with the amount of money that they have to claw back, with the amount of money of people's money that they have to sort of ensure in a roundabout way to retain their customers, protect them from frauds and scams, which is fairly important. But the way they've gone about doing this is to pop up a notification on my mobile banking app. Say, we're now going to collect all of your biometric data about how you use your phone, how you hold your phone, your fingerprints, your facial recognition, the angle that you hold it on, how you type, what you type, common errors that you make in your typing, whether you're on a call or not. So we need call access logs as well, what devices your phone or internet computer what you're connected to, their IP addresses, the addresses of other devices on your networks as well, all of your installed apps on your mobile device, so on your phones, but also extending to looking at what programs you have on your computer. And there is a logical reason behind how they've arrived at this conclusion, is that there are a lot of particularly boomers and older who get caught up in all these weird scams and frauds all around the world, which are increasing in their rate of appearance. And they lose a lot of money overseas to them. So what the bank thinks they can do with this information is go, well, if we know you're on a call and we know you're in your banking app and we can see where you're typing to who you're going to send it to, we have blacklists of all of those frauds and scams out there. We know sort of what we're looking at because we look at the typologies that come out. We can now pick that up early and prevent the transaction. They will protect a lot of people in that respect. But there is no way that I would ever let you have that kind of access to my device.
Why is that?
Because I have confidential client information on there. I have confidential government information on there. I have my personal passwords. I have my personal crypto wallets on those devices as well, which I'm not going to give you the passwords to keylog them and send them to anonymous third parties. Why would I do any of this? You cannot have access at that level to my phone or to my computer for that matter. So what I have to do now is, if I don't accept those terms and conditions, there's no way around it. I'm not allowed to use internet banking. I'm not allowed to use mobile banking. I have to go into the branch, which closes at 4 o'clock. So I can only do my banking between 9 and 4. I can alternatively use their phone banking system as well. So while I still do have some access, it has now become hyper inconvenient. And so I'm actually moving away from the BNZ for the first time in 41 years. I have talked to the head of financial crime there. That's just the decision that they're going with. I saw him at the conference a couple of weeks ago.
What conference? Just
the New Zealand Police Financial Intelligence Unit and ACAMS conference that I host every year in Wellington. If you haven't come, you should come.
There you go.
I've seen these people down there already. None of this is sort of mentioned. It's sort of been just rolled out with no alternative to get around that. I don't need that level of protection, but because some people do, we're now saying, well, the needs of those few people outweigh the needs of everybody else. And so I can't give the BNZ any kind of disclaimer that I won't hold them liable for frauds and scams that I transfer my money to. I can't take that personal responsibility back to myself and say, look, it's okay, guys. I choose not to have the spyware installed on my phone, but I will also not hold you liable if I send money to a scammer, which has happened. I'm not immune to scams. And so that choice has been taken away from me entirely. So I have to move banks, but it's coming for every bank.
So at the moment, BNZ has rolled out these terms and conditions.
And ANZ.
And ANZ.
They're on their website. You can go and check.
Were they opt-in? Or
No.
So it was just, these are the new terms and conditions. Click this box. Otherwise, you can't access
Correct.
your online banking.
Yep.
And was it so on your PC, on your phone as well?
I haven't logged in on my PC at all, but it did appear on my phone, and other people have now sent me screenshots of the same thing happening, because these rollouts always happen slowly. They don't always happen at once.
Right. They picked the wrong guy with you.
They picked the wrong guy to start with, because I actually know what is going on here. It's like, oh, well, they picked the wrong person to start with. Yeah. If they rolled it at everybody else and I ended up being last, it would have been...
It works for the mayor.
I bet you it is, actually. I bet you it is. I bet you just started alphabetically at the top of the list, and so all the Abbotts and Alcocks and all the rest of the people at the top have all just got this first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a long way to go, thankfully. But still, it's a concern, right? Because I think in the back of my mind, especially, there's this, call it a concern that exists, not necessarily based on history, but based on a view of the future that I often wonder about, where it might get harder for the everyday person to access their own money. When you extrapolate some of these data points, and you hear more and more stories over time about how people's transactions are being blocked or how they're being debanked, like Jack Mallers recently, the CEO from Stripe, being debanked. I've heard of many of my clients trying to buy Bitcoin and the bank stopping them from making those transactions. I was stopped from buying shares in a private company 6 weeks ago. I made an online transfer to buy shares in this company at probably too late at night, maybe, to a bank account with a funny name. And that wasn't allowed to go through. And so I just wonder if you kind of draw that out and see where this goes. More and more surveillance designed to keep everybody safe, of course, just like everything is always under that. And I'm not being cynical in that. There's no truth to that is true. But eventually it captures everybody, and then people get excluded from using financial services. That would be my biggest fear. Do you think that that's where things are going, where there will be increased surveillance to the point where certain groups of people won't be able to transact because of who they are, what they believe in?
As you pointed out, that's not where it starts, but that is where it ends up. And we can just look at China as an example of that. This is how these things slowly get tied together into your digital ID, which is coming with Judith Collins' digital driver's license. That's going to be a digital ID. That will roll into having a digital passport. There are advantages of using those systems. It's going to make everything quicker, smoother, and easier in a lot of respects. But it hands a lot of power to whoever's in government at the time. It's like, that's okay. It's like, well, maybe David Seymour's in charge, and he does lots of things that I like, so I don't have a problem with it, except. And then Chloe Swarbrick gets elected. And now you've got carbon taxes and meat taxes, and you're forced to be a vegan or vegetarian. Maybe that works for you. Maybe that's what you think people should do, because you are a vegan, vegetarian, and you don't fly anywhere, and you don't use cars, and you walk all over the place. But then you won't like it when David Seymour's in charge, because other people around you will be using their horrible polluting cars and eating lots of meat. And so when you centralize that kind of power, even if you initially do it for good reasons, it doesn't stay that way for very long. And when you combine what we've talked about on previous podcast episodes, which you have to go and watch, with central bank digital currencies and the introduction of more digital IDs and now all these surveillance controls over your finances, you very, very quickly get to the point of, well, we can now protect everyone from themselves. So now I'd never get to choose my level of risk. And whether or not I'm a particularly risk adverse person or otherwise, that choice is now no longer mine. I don't get to choose if I want to use a car or public transport or cycle, which all have different levels of risk. The car probably being one of the more risky options. But for me, that's worth it for the benefits that those risks allow me to take. It's generally faster. It's more comfortable. I can set my own air conditioning environment to my own level of comfort and comfortable seats that I like. And I can take personal responsibility for myself and my actions in those situations. But if the government now controls that and says, no, everyone has to use public transport because it's the least risky form of transport, because we have professionally trained drivers that drive set routes, we know everything is.
We're reducing risk.
We're reducing risk.
We'll lower the speed limit as well down to 10.
We'll make you safer.
Yeah.
Okay, but now you haven't let me make the choice about how I want to do things. And that may not fit the lifestyle that I'm trying to live.
Are you just being selfish, though, with that attitude?
Yes.
And isn't that bad?
No.
Why?
Everybody is selfish. Everybody is inherently selfish. Go and read any Ayn Rand if you haven't already. That's where objectivism comes from. That's where Richard Dawkins talks about the selfish gene. Everybody and all of us are all inherently selfish. It's just whether or not we want to impose our selfishness on others. And I would say, please try not to do that. You're imposing your choices on others, and that in of itself is selfish behavior. Whereas it's almost the least selfish way to go, where it's like, I'm only going to make my decisions, you make your decision. That's actually the least selfish position.
Almost framed, though, that it's the opposite, right? Because, yeah, like I look at this going, well, all you think about is yourself, yourself, yourself. What about the other people, right? But really, if I had that attitude, I'm also thinking about myself, and I'm trying to find power structures that will support my view and enforce it on you, which is often the government. So we're kind of contracting out our agency to a third party who has, well, they can do it, right?
Yeah, they can.
They have taxing power.
They have the monopoly on force.
Yeah, they own the military.
Since the government has the monopoly on force and they use our money to support that monopoly on force, and there is a point at which we are okay with that as well, because what we don't want is feudal lords and kings and the most vicious person running around to end up at the top of the hierarchy, because that's literally feudalism. We don't really want that. That's not actually good for innovation and flourishing and creating more wealth for everybody. That actually achieves the opposite effect and concentrates wealth in the hands of a few. But it's the same problem we've got now.
Yeah,
the power is concentrating all over the place.
That's the tendency.
Anti-financial crime. So we now have a single supervisor in the Department of Internal Affairs, which you'd be aware of as a financial advisor, right? So that has now moved away from the three separate departments who all had their own niches and ways that they could look at financial crime in New Zealand and act in pragmatic ways, to now everything is with the DIA. And a lot of the good people that I quite like have been moved out of there.
Why do you think this concentration and this is it simply to be more effective with less resource? Is that why we're seeing a concentration like this?
That is what people will tell you. And there are some economies of scale to be made there. But the economies of scale graph, after a certain point, starts to go down on the other side. It just gets too big to manage.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah. You get diminishing returns on it. And so, yes, there are efficiencies to be made from having a single supervisor. Yes, it brings us into better alignment with the sort of international anti-financial crime community, which is a part of why it is being done as well. That is the model that pretty much all other countries use. I don't think that's the right model to go with. The group at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, they have very deep and very specific knowledge about how the banking system operates that people who are in the DIA don't have. The Financial Markets Authority has very deep and wide knowledge about how people in the financial markets interact that the DIA doesn't have. And the DIA has a lot of deep knowledge and experience in a lot of areas that the RBNZ and the FMA don't have. And so that's sort of why they were all separated out. And the manner in which that ends up being enforced and implemented and how guidance is issued is now all coming from one single centralized place. And just like in politics, in bureaucracy, the psychopaths rise to the top. Those with the most psychopathic tendencies, the ones that really want to push to get to the top. I'm not saying this in like a violent or negative way, but those people always rise to the top. Those are the people that end up being the heads of the departments, the leaders of this, the leaders of that, because they are willing to go further and farther than everybody else and to generally work harder as well to achieve those objectives. That doesn't mean they're good leaders.
It just means they're good at playing the game.
They're good at playing the bureaucratic game. And if you look at the makeup of the DIA, while there are still a lot of good people in the DIA, a few come to mind, a lot of the other good people have been moved off to different departments. They're now in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, still in AML, still anti-financial crime, but they've been moved. And those were previously the people that were all the heads of the departments. Same at the Reserve Bank. Their role has been reduced significantly. Whether or not those people stay there, I don't think they will. I think they're probably looking at retiring, moving out, going off to a different position because their purpose has now been sort of taken away from them. Right. So it has good and bad things. I am uncertain about how that's going to play out. We're going to find out one way or another. I'm not filled with hope and confidence after what I heard at the conference. That does not fill me with confidence. And the other people who I've spoken to who attended the conference seem to be in a fairly similar boat about that as well.
In terms of what? That is not a good direction that we're going by combining everything into one agency.
Yes. The speeches that were given from the Department of Internal Affairs did not fill us with hope for the future. I don't mean to rubbish anyone in specific, right?
Of course not. And sometimes it's the position, it's not the people, right? And it's the evolution.
It's always a bit of both.
Right. Okay.
It's always a bit of both. And so those kinds of people tend to rise to the top. There are a few people that I can't understand how they've got to where they are.
I think that's probably true in almost any organization, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. This is not specific to what's happening.
Right? This is what you're saying, is that when the structure appears, which is very centralized, you're creating a faster pathway for these people with narcissistic, psychopathic tendencies to rise to the top of an even bigger organization, which creates the risk that they'll exert their perverse ideologies on a larger group of people.
I would like to say that the more you centralize power, the worse mistakes become. I think that's a better way to put it.
Say that again. So the more you centralize power, the worse mistakes become.
Yeah, because everybody makes mistakes, including me and everybody else. But the more you centralize power, what you're creating is single points of failure. And by decentralizing things as much as possible, you're spreading out the single points of failure as much as possible, so that when people make poor decisions, because they will, that is inevitable.
Sure. Right.
It only affects a small group of people.
You're creating firewalls between these networks. So if you think now globally, because this is probably a trend that's happening all over the world.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so how much is New Zealand just going along with what's happening in the world versus deciding what's like how much decision making actually happens in New Zealand versus how much is actually being inflicted is a strong word, and imposed is even stronger, isn't it?
I think impose is probably accurate though.
So tell me about that. Okay, so who is imposing these things on us then?
This comes out of the mutual evaluations that are sort of, I can't remember what the time frame for them off the top of my head is. It's every 3 or 4 years. I think it's probably 4 years actually. And that is all the countries sort of look at each other and they look at their anti-financial crime frameworks and they give everyone in a sort of a grade and sort of identify areas that needs to be improved. This is all done through the Financial Action Task Force. And so when New Zealand started this in 2013, we were grey listed for quite a few years. And I had to deal with this as a compliance officer. It became fairly hard to transfer money in and out of New Zealand because we were being grey listed, which is sort of, you're not doing anything wrong, but you could be a lot better than you are. So we're just going to be a little bit cautious about the transactions that we sort of do in and out of New Zealand. And we weren't enough to be blacklisted because we were pretty good. We're a fairly low corruption country in general, despite what I or other people may think. We are actually fairly low corruption on a sort of global standards. And then after those evaluations, we started to improve and put more anti-financial crime things in place, one of which we've talked about on previous podcast, which is asset recovery,
Right.
which is civil asset forfeiture. That was a requirement from one of the mutual evaluations done globally to sort of bump us up back into that green category again. And so when these happen, one of the things that was identified was we didn't have a single supervisor, and not all the supervisors communicated with each other. So if there was a banking problem, the financial markets wouldn't necessarily know about it, and the DIA wouldn't necessarily know about it. And that now opens loopholes for people to exploit, which is true. That is 100% accurate. That is exactly what happens. But the counter to that is when you have a single supervisor, if you have any level of corruption building up in that organization for any reason, and I'm not saying that there is currently, but it tends to invite it when you have those single, very powerful organizations, A, it will be hidden, so you won't know about it anyway. And B, it is much more likely to happen because it is all in one place with that centralization.
Makes sense, yeah.
And so some very minor decisions that happen in the bureaucracy that may be poor decisions, mistakes that are not fantastic, they tend to build up.
Okay.
And so when it goes up the chain, if there's been mistakes made at the bottom, if the information is not perfectly correct all the time, because all humans are fallible and it never will be, those mistakes tend to accumulate until you get to a massive single point of failure, which usually happens in the leadership. That person usually has to resign, but it's not always entirely their fault. It is a fault of all the little mistakes that are built up all to one single point. Right. You look at the disaster with the Titanic or any massive disasters like that. It's not any one particular decision that causes these disasters. The Chernobyl reactor, 3 Mile Island, Fukushima. It's not any one particular decision that makes the disasters happen. It is the cumulative effect of a lot of poor decisions generally that ends up in those situations.
Right.
But when you concentrate power, when you concentrate all things into one place, you vastly increase the impact of those single points of failure in the long run.
So the more concentrated, the more centralized power is, the more prone that organization is to concentrate those bits of mistakes, we'll call it, into single events which cause a lot of harm. But then at the same time, there's also people that are more likely to rise up within those organizations and exert influence in a negative way as well.
Because they're sociopaths and psychopaths, and their primary goal is looking good.
Okay. And this is where I kind of want to bring it to, because this is kind of what I've been thinking about before you came in. When you talk about money, you talk about it in pretty stark moral terms. And fair enough, right? Because you've been involved with financial crime and stuff like that, where you've seen some pretty horrible stuff. But from your, and I know that you're an evolutionist, you're an atheist. I think you described it last time. Where does all this come from, and how do you kind of explain where this almost evil comes from when you think about all this happening? Because it's not just systemic and structural, right? And it's not just psychopaths that just appear out of nowhere. Where does evil come from in your view?
What do you mean by evil?
The force that's motivating people to kind of want to exert their influence in a way where they probably are conscious that it's negative, it's causing harm to others. So whatever you go deep down inside, right? Like, what is that?
That right there is the key point. Causing harm to others.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that is the definition of evil.
Right.
I think no one actually thinks they're evil. Hitler didn't think he was evil. Stalin didn't think he was evil. Churchill doesn't think he's evil, even though some people think he is now. Right? No one thinks they're evil. Everyone thinks they're trying to do good. Everyone thinks they're trying to do good. But I think the real question is, have you assisted with increasing the agency of others? In which case, I would say that that is a good outcome, where you help other people increase their own agency. And I would say if you are decreasing people's agency, that to me is bad. So in very simplistic terms, I think that's actually what most people mean by good and bad. When people want something to happen, it's generally, I want this to happen because it helps increase my agency to do ABC thing. And it's like, well, I think that thing is bad, so I want to decrease the other person's ability to do that kind of thing because I think that is bad for them or for me or for society or whatever it is. but you want to decrease other people's agency to prevent what you perceive as harm. And I don't think that's a fantastic way to sort of look at it. I think you should look at, I want to try to do as much good as possible. And to me, that means increasing everybody else's agency as much as I possibly can. And since I fall into the subset of everybody, then I want to increase my own agency as well.
But where does it come from, though? That desire to want to do good, defined as that, or the desire to want to do evil, defined as we just did before?
I suppose when you're looking back to an evolutionary past, when you're all in little tribes like that, the tribe that you attack and kill think you're evil, and your tribe thinks you're good.
So you think it's more of a survivalist instinct? It's instinct?
It definitely helps to have in-group preference. We've got all these hangovers when you come to racism or sexism or any of the other categories that we have.
That's
today.
kind of what that is it's
in-group
survival
preference.
instinct. Yep. Yeah, in-group preference. Is that what you said?
In-group preference.
And which is I guess true of, like, say, racism. If you think you're better than the other tribe, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
you're trying to survive, you're competing for the resource, your team's going to win.
Or even more recently, LGBT, etc. Right? That is also in-group preference for those people that identify there to have more in-group preference for people that are more similar to them.
Right, they're trying to survive. They feel threatened. It's existential.
And you get the suicidal empathy that when that occurs, what you're getting is out-group preference, where you prefer groups that are not yours. So you've got in-group preference, which are groups you belong to, and then out-group preferences, which are groups that you don't belong to. And you become suicidally empathetic when you have more empathy for out-groups than you have for in-groups. And that's why it's suicidal empathy. You have empathy out-groups to the detriment of your own group.
And so do you think that these instincts to do good, to do evil, have largely evolved over time, but really they've come from our history? Like
all the way back to the genesis of life.
Right.
Like and the reason is genetics. Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene, if you want to know why this is, read The Selfish Gene. It is the best explanation of this at all, because on a very fundamental level, what your genes are doing are selecting for more copies of themselves. And we are a group of genes, and our genes have an in-group preference for us to reproduce as many copies of us as we can. That's where sexual reproduction drive comes from. But that's also where you get preferences for your immediate family, because they share more genes in common than you do with other people that are not in your immediate family. But that also is why you have in-group preferences within your race as well, because we are much more likely to share genes in common than I am to share with people from India.
Sure.
Or people from China, because their group is a little bit further outside my sort of group. Honestly, it's the theory is good, but it's a dumb way for us to look at it. Because at the end of the day, we literally all come from one single female human. We are all related to one person at the end of the day, if you go back far enough. And further than that, we are related to one single piece of RNA, if you go back far enough.
Yeah.
So we are all related.
So basically what you're saying is we're inbred, and that's the problem.
And we share it with all the animals and plants around our planet as well.
Yeah.
Like this goes a lot deeper than people think.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And to have these weird in-group and out-group preferences is kind of odd. But I think you should have, going back to being selfish, right? Your genes have an in-group preference for you. And I think that's where your preference should start. But what you should try to do with that preference is help the people around you in your community, because you are most likely to be most similar to them, and they are most likely to have the most copy of your genes. And that's where it sort of comes from.
Yeah.
But that can only extend so far.
Yeah.
It can't extend to every single person in the world, even though it is true that we are all very related to each other.
Yeah.
It can't extend that far. Our brains have not evolved to get to that point where we're capable of being that connected. It's just not a thing. So
is humanity getting better or getting worse?
Oh, we're getting better.
We're getting better?
We're getting better.
Yeah.
We always go in these cycles. Things get a lot better for quite some time, and then they get a lot worse. Yeah. But it is better to be alive now than it is to be alive 100 years ago. It's just that right now we are going through that nasty period where our money is screwed up, our governments are screwed up, everything that flows from that is all screwed up, and we're going to have a big reset.
So higher highs, higher lows from here on in, but we're just in one of the higher lows. Trend is for humanity to basically get more organized, more charitable, more adept at solving problems.
Which we do.
Yeah.
That's what technology does for us. That's what tool use does for us. That's what AI is for us. It is another tool to help resolve some problems. That's what money is.
Yeah.
It is a tool to resolve the double coincidence of wants, which was what we had with barter and trade. It was impossible to get over that. We invented a new tool to do it. That tool was called money.
Yeah. So you would be then, by default, fairly optimistic over a long enough time frame, and it kind of gives me the answer to the question, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway, which is what, and then we'll finish up on this one, is your belief that the world will ultimately get better in the future? Is that one of the primary drivers as to why you are involved in politics?
Yes, the world will get better over time, but occasionally we need to have world wars, which really sucks for all the people that end up in that world war, but things get better afterwards. We get the invention of penicillin. We get the invention of biological additions, technological additions to our bodies to replace lost limbs and those things that come out of those horrific events. We get access to nuclear power, which is a fantastic way that is carbon neutral to generate large amounts of energy. Whether or not we use it for that purpose is another matter. These are all just tools that come out of this. And unfortunately, because we have that in-group, out-group selection bias, right? We end up going through boom periods, and then we go into massive decline. And
it's more like tough times create
exactly.
Strong men, and strong men create good times.
Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times.
And we're probably in that cycle right now.
We're in the hard times.
Yeah.
We just happen to be in that particular portion of things. We've gone from the good times. We've had, I hate to say weak men. When I say men, I mean people, right? Weak people create hard times. We've created our own hard times. And during hard times, you see people gravitate more towards collectivism. And so the more collectivist we get, that means we have more weak people in the population who want to abrogate their responsibility to other people because they can't do it. And so you get a buildup of weak people in the population, which create the hard times, which create the strong people. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping.
People that you might hate, but they're strong, right?
They are strong. That doesn't mean they're good. It just means that they're strong.
We live in a world where strength wins sometimes. So, it is what it is.
At the end of the day, that is kind of a fundamental law of nature that unfortunately it doesn't make you right in the terms of you're correct in a morally logical argument, but it does make you right if there's no one left to fight you.
That's a good point.
So take that as you will, guys. Like I'm not saying it is a good thing, but it is kind of true.
Yeah.
And I would love if we could move away from that position and rather be right in a morally correct way where we don't have to enforce our views on other people, where we can take a step back and take a more libertarian approach and go, well, there's no way that I'm going to agree with everyone else about everything all the time. Therefore, I should largely focus on myself and I should try to be a good person. And by good, I mean, try to help increase the agency of other people around you as much as you possibly can. If you do that, and if we all take that kind of attitude where I'll do well, everybody near me will do well, everyone near them will do well, that's how we actually build something into a more positive future. But apparently we need regular reminders. So here we are.
Which is a great way to finish. Thank you, John. Now, if people want to follow what you're doing, where's the best place for them?
I have updated my socials for this. I am now official John Alcock on Instagram and official John Alcock on TikTok. I don't have a YouTube channel specifically for this purpose yet, but it will be coming. I'm John Alcock on Facebook and I'm John Alcock on LinkedIn. So you should be able to find me everywhere there.
With 2 L's, right?
1 L.
1 L. Okay.
1 L.
Just like Jeffrey
Alcock.
with 1 F, Jeffrey.
If it's got 2, it's Alcock.
Okay, there you go.
And there are Alcocks out there.
I'm sure there is, but this is Alcock.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we've made that clear now. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Darcy.
Cheers.